The AI era may destroy your company. Disruption is happening faster now than most companies can absorb. And if you are a corporate leader and ready to get serious about corporate entrepreneurship, you will not want to miss this video. Entrepreneurs are likely the answer to this threat, but too often they are sidelined or even fired. I'm Doc John, the Entreprofessor, and I spent over 20 years as a corporate entrepreneur. Now I teach entrepreneurship at a leading university, and I'm also a startup entrepreneur in the AI space. In this video, I'm going to walk through what it means to be an entrepreneur, what it means to establish a corporate entrepreneurship system and culture, and I'm going to walk through examples of 7 companies that have been very effective at establishing innovation models. I'll also talk about 5 things they have in common and 3 reasons why most corporate innovation efforts fail. Let's get into it. First, I want to break down some terminology because so often terms like entrepreneurship and corporate entrepreneurship, corporate venturing, and innovation are used interchangeably. And there are some really distinct differences in terms of what these mean in practice in an organization. So let me start out with entrepreneurship. And I recently did a whole video on entrepreneurship. And if you want to be an entrepreneur or you want to cultivate a culture of entrepreneurship, you should definitely check out that video. But to sum it up, Gifford Pinchot described entrepreneurs as dreamers who do within an organizational context. Those individuals that will go beyond their jobs and look for opportunities that the business has and find ways to explore those opportunities and find out if there really is a way for the company to expand their business or their reach or their capabilities to new customers through entrepreneurial efforts. These individuals often operate much like entrepreneurs. They're very resourceful, they're enterprising, they're relational, and they will be proactive, going out and finding ways to move ideas forward by leveraging their internal network, often navigating the internal corporate politics along the way. This is different than corporate entrepreneurship, which is the structure, the systems, the strategies, incentives, and processes that make entrepreneurship possible. This is the more formal organizational endeavor to have an innovation capability, to find new opportunities and to explore those very much in the same way that external entrepreneurs would if they were trying to disrupt a market or find new opportunities, but to do this inside the organization. The goal is to cultivate and encourage entrepreneurial activity in a way that's repeatable inside the company. Some examples of this are companies that establish innovation centers or labs or R&D, research and development capabilities that are looking for new market opportunities, testing those opportunities in the market, and building out those to see if they are something they should scale and incorporate into their existing product lines or create new product lines as well. A third term that comes up sometimes is called corporate venturing. And this might sound like just another way to say corporate entrepreneurship, but it's not. Corporate venturing is what happens when one of the ideas that have emerged from entrepreneurs' activities or corporate entrepreneurial structures or systems, and it's recognized that this is substantial enough to become a new business. The originator of this idea was Robert Bergelman, who suggested that there should be structures in place not only to find new opportunities and explore them, but also to scale them. More recently, research has been done into the nature of corporate entrepreneurship by Hornsby, Karatko, and Zara. They developed an instrument called the Corporate Entrepreneurship Assessment Instrument, the CEAI. And this has been a way to measure the ability of companies to be entrepreneurial in terms of the things that they do to make it possible for entrepreneurial work to occur. This research has uncovered 5 conditions that make entrepreneurial behavior more likely within established organizations. These are top management support, work discretion and autonomy, rewards and reinforcement, time availability, and organizational boundaries. And this means just organizations that allow ideas, people, and information to move, even though they may run against the status quo of the organization. Ever wonder if there's more to work than just a paycheck? A book that I highly recommend is A Work Life Worth Living, Your Guide to Creating a Meaningful Career. The author, Jeff Westphal, shows how to turn any job into a source of fulfillment. Discover practical steps to build a work life that you want. Learn more at jeffwestphal.org. So what I want to do next is walk through 7 examples. These are companies that have become very prominent for their ongoing efforts in corporate entrepreneurship and the success that they've had by being intentional about promoting corporate entrepreneurship. Let's give these a look. Number one is 3M. They're known for what is called slack time, giving 15% time to employees. 3M may be the classic corporate entrepreneurship case. Most people know the Post-it note story. Spencer Silver was trying to create a strong adhesive and instead created a weak one. For years, he had what amounted to a solution looking for a problem. Then Art Fry, another 3M employee, became frustrated because bookmarks kept falling out of his church hymnal. He remembered Silver's adhesive and made the connection that eventually became the Post-it note. The deeper story, though, is not just the product. It's the organizational mechanism that allowed the product to emerge. 3M had created Slack in the schedule of its employees. Its famous 15% time policy gave technical employees legitimate permission to devote some time working on projects they believe had potential. The company also developed seed funding mechanisms, scientific career paths, and a culture that historically tolerated productive failure. The executive lesson is not that every company should copy exactly 15%. It's that experimentation has to be legitimate within the company. If employees technically have permission to innovate, but they know that they will be punished at performance review time because their normal workload still assumes 100% capacity, then you don't have 15% time at all. You have 115% time. That's not innovation, it's overtime. The 3M story also carries a warning. Efficiency systems are valuable for mature businesses, but if they eliminate too much variation, they can also eliminate the experimentation from which new ideas emerge. In a world where AI dramatically lowers the cost of experimentation, companies that create legitimate slack in the employee schedule for learning may have an advantage over those that treat every unassigned activity as a waste of time. Number two is Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works. They actually separate the explorers from the ongoing operations of the existing business. Lockheed gives us a very different model. Instead of spreading entrepreneurial freedom broadly throughout the company, you protect a dedicated team from the company. That is the essence of Skunk Works. And this goes all the way back to 1943. Kelly Johnson assembled a small team, charged them with developing America's first operational jet fighter. And that team delivered the XP-80 prototype in just 143 days. The operating model emphasized small, empowered teams, minimal bureaucracy, direct access to decision makers and customers, and usually high authority concentrated in the program leader. Skunk Works later became associated with extraordinary projects, such as the U-2 stealth bomber and the SR-71 Blackbird jet. The big idea here is structural insulation. Sometimes an emerging business simply cannot survive inside the systems designed to run an established company because its margins, its customers, technology, uncertainty, and appropriate metrics are all different. If you force that venture through the company's normal budgeting, procurement, staffing, compliance, and approval systems, you can kill it before customers ever get a chance to evaluate it. That's why the Skunk Works model matters. It reminds executives that innovation does not always need a nicer room. Sometimes it needs a different operating model. Number three is W.L. Gore. They are known for their lattice organization and dabble time. They've essentially made entrepreneurship part of the culture. W.L. Gore offers a very different model. Instead of isolating innovation in a separate center, Gore built entrepreneurial freedom into the organization itself. The company became famous for its lattice organization, where all employees are called associates, and leadership depends heavily on the ability to attract followers, rather than simply to occupy a position in the corporate org chart. People can pursue ideas, recruit collaborators, and build support around opportunities that may not have appeared in any formal plan. A good example is the Elixir guitar string story that illustrates how this works. Dave Myers was experimenting with Gore's material technology on bicycle cables when he began wondering whether a similar coating could protect guitar strings from the oils and contaminants that often make them lose their tone. Myers was not a musician, and Gore was not a guitar string company, but its culture allowed him to explore the connection and recruit colleagues around it. That work eventually became Elixir Strings. The distinctive lesson is that innovation was not something employees had to travel to another building to perform. The culture itself was designed to let unexpected connections emerge. It raises a useful execution question. Is innovation something your employees visit or something your employees are actually allowed to do? Number 4 is Adobe's Kickbox. They have essentially democratized the first bet. Adobe attacked a different innovation problem: the difficulty of getting the first small amount of money needed to test an idea. Large companies can spend millions acquiring another business while forcing an employee through 6 meetings to get $2,000 for a customer experiment. Adobe's Kickbox was designed to change that dynamic. Participating employees received a structured innovation process and a prepaid card with a modest amount of money, and they could use this to test an idea without going through the normal approval process. The real innovation here was not the red box or the $1,000 that employees got access to. It was the portfolio logic behind the system. Instead of asking executives to correctly choose 5 winners from 50 PowerPoint decks, Adobe allowed many people to run inexpensive experiments and then used evidence to determine which projects deserved more investment. That is especially interesting in the age of frontier AI because the cost of the first experiment has collapsed. A motivated employee can prototype an agent, analyze a workflow, mock up a customer experience, or test an automation concept in days rather than months. So giving them a token budget to use AI can be a way to cultivate this kind of innovation. That shifts the executive question from how do we fund innovation toward how do we create safe boundaries within which hundreds of intelligent experiments can happen. Number 5 is Intuit and their program called Design for Delight, and also giving unstructured time. In other words, they're giving their employees the opportunity to fall in love with the problem. Intuit contributes another distinctive capability: customer-centered experimentation. Its Design for Delight approach emphasizes deep customer empathy, going broad before going narrow, and then rapid expansion. The central philosophy is to fall in love with a customer's problem rather than a particular solution. That principle matters even more in the current AI environment because AI creates an enormous temptation to work backwards. Executives see a powerful technology and immediately ask what they can do with AI agents or generative AI or some form of automation. Those are reasonable questions, but they can easily produce technology in search of a problem. Corporate entrepreneurship should begin somewhere else. Where is the customer experiencing friction? Where is work unnecessarily expensive? Where does information break down? And where could we create something customers currently cannot accomplish? Only then should we ask whether AI changes what is possible. The distinction is subtle but critical. You do not want an AI lab filled with impressive demonstrations. What you want is an entrepreneurial system that discovers valuable problems and uses AI where it creates an unfair advantage. Number 6 is Amazon. Jeff Bezos is famous for saying, "We continue to be a day one company, and we always want to be." This is turning innovation into an operating system by working backwards and creating single-threaded teams. Amazon may be the strongest challenge to the assumption that innovation requires a centralized entrepreneurship center of some kind. Its more important contribution is a collection of operating mechanisms embedded throughout the company. Working backwards forces proposed products to begin with a future press release and an FAQ that define customer value before the team builds anything. Single-threaded leadership gives important initiatives a leader whose primary job is that initiative rather than adding innovation to an already full workload. Small teams create focus, and the distinction between one-way and two-way doors encourages fast decisions when those decisions are reversible. The distinctive insight is that Amazon tries to create a governance for entrepreneurship. Ideas do not receive permission. They receive a process for becoming businesses. That matters because one of the greatest weaknesses of corporate innovation centers is that many are good at generating ideas, but terrible at answering the question that follows a successful experiment. What happens next? Number 7 is Google. They allow 20% time and also a program they call X. Google became famous for its 20% time concept and projects associated with employee autonomy. Outcomes included Gmail, Google News, and elements of AdSense. The romantic version of the story is that everyone at Google simply spent Fridays inventing the future. But the reality became more complicated as the organization scaled. Broad 20% time became harder to sustain, and Alphabet, the parent company of Google, increasingly formalized exploration through structures such as X and other dedicated initiatives. That evolution itself is a useful lesson because corporate entrepreneurship has to mature as the organization matures. A mechanism that works with 500 employees may not work the same way with 100,000 employees, even if the underlying principle remains intact. Google's current position in AI makes it especially relevant because the company must reshape parts of its own core experience while facing aggressive external AI competitors. This is corporate entrepreneurship at its hardest. Can you disrupt the business that is currently paying the bills before someone else does it for you? That is the imperative that Google is addressing. At first glance, these companies look very different. 3M creates slack time. Skunkworks creates insulation. Gore challenges the structure of hierarchy. Adobe distributes micro capital. Intuit teaches customer-centered experimentation. Amazon embeds venture governance into its operating model, and Google has evolved from broad autonomy towards increasingly structured exploration. Underneath those differences, though, the DNA is remarkably consistent. Successful corporate entrepreneurship usually provides 5 things. Permission is the starting condition for any corporate entrepreneurship system, and without it, opportunities stay hidden and entrepreneurs stay quiet. Number 2 is time. Innovation cannot be expected on top of everything else. Successful systems carve out real, protected time to explore, time that is visible on the calendar and defended by leadership. Protected time is not a perk, it's a precondition. Without it, the other 4 elements cannot function. The third thing they share in common is resources. And it's not necessarily millions of dollars. Often very small amounts are enough to test critical assumptions and generate the first real evidence that an idea has merit and could be a viable opportunity. The purpose of these resources are to remove friction that stops motivated employees from running the first cheap, decisive experiments before the idea dies in the queue. The resources also present a signal. It's a small committed resource that sends a message. It says this exploration is real. It's not a suggestion. It converts intent into action. So the shift with resources goes from how do we fund innovation to how quickly can we generate credible evidence. This is a fundamentally different conversation. The fourth thing that they all have in common is sponsorship and autonomy. A sponsor is someone situated in the organization and is willing to spend real political capital to shield an emerging idea from the normal machinery of the organization. Planning cycles, resource reviews, margin expectations, and quarterly targets. This is not a passive endorsement, it's active protection, and many times it's expensive. The reason autonomy matters is it lets the team run experiments that the core business would otherwise smother before they yield any insights. Without it, every early stage experiment is judged by standards designed for mature products, and then it fails by comparison. It's also possible that the new idea could interfere with existing models in ways that other factions may want to push it off or prevent it from changing the way they're doing business. Gifford Pinchot called this the corporate immune system, where the organization actually reacts and tries to stop innovation because it would interfere with existing systems. And finally, the fifth thing that all of these have in common is a path to scale. They start with experimentation. They provide a path to generate evidence and validate assumptions. Then there's a path for venturing, providing a dedicated team with metered funding and protected leadership so that they can really pursue the idea to confirm it's viable and set the stage for larger scale. And third, business, full resources, clear ownership, scalable operations. And these 3 things, experiment, venture, and business, give a path to scale that allows an idea to be nurtured early on, to be tested over time, and to have a path to grow to full scale within the business. Before I wrap up, I want to walk through 3 reasons why innovation centers fail. This is where a lot of executives get frustrated. They create a lab. They hire an innovation team, they run hackathons, they launch an accelerator, and perhaps even build a beautiful collaboration space with whiteboards and expensive coffee. Then a few years later, everyone starts asking the same question. Where's the growth? Where's the innovation? Where's the new idea that's changing the nature of our business? Looking across both the research and these company examples that we looked at in this video, I think most failures can be reduced into 3 fundamental problems. Failure number 1, companies build a center instead of a system. This may be the most common mistake. The company creates a place where innovation is supposed to happen without changing the organization around it. The innovation team runs workshops, employees generate ideas, and the company produces design thinking sessions, hackathons, prototypes, demos, and pitch competitions. There can be a tremendous amount of activity, yet very little of it is actually connected tightly enough to the strategic questions facing the business. What customer problems are we trying to solve? Which part of the business model could be disrupted? Where could new technology fundamentally change our economics? And what new businesses should this organization be capable of creating? Without those connections, the Innovation Center becomes an idea factory rather than a growth engine, and eventually it risks becoming innovation theater. The company can point to visible evidence that innovation is happening without actually changing its ability to create new businesses. The research on corporate entrepreneurship makes the broader point that entrepreneurial activity works best when it's tied to organization-wide strategy rather than isolated to a single program or department. An innovation center can support that strategy, but it can't be a substitute for it. The second reason why corporate innovation centers fail is that the core business still controls the experiment. This is where Gifford Pinchot's idea of the corporate immune system becomes especially useful. The core organization is designed to produce predictability, efficiency, quality, margin, control, and repeatable execution. These are all good things. The problem is that the same mechanisms can destroy an emerging business when the new venture is judged immediately by the standards of a mature one. The core business asks for a 5-year revenue forecast, demands to know when the venture will hit normal margins, asks how many customers can be generated, wants to understand why scarce people should be diverted from its quarter's commitments, and asks for the ROI before there's enough evidence to actually calculate one. Those questions are reasonable for mature business, but they're often the wrong question for an experiment. An emerging venture should initially be accountable for learning. Did customers demonstrate the problem? Did they engage with the prototype? Will they pay? And which assumptions did we invalidate? When the formal innovation message says one thing and the organizational system says another, the system will win every time. This is why the emerging idea must be protected enough to learn differently from the core business. The third reason that innovation centers fail is there's no path from experiment to business. This may be the most frustrating failure of all because the experiment can actually work. Customers like it. The prototype generates positive results. The innovation team celebrates, and then someone asks the obvious question: what happens now? Who owns it? Where does the next round of funding come from? Does it move into an existing business unit or become a separate team? Who sells it? Who supports it? Who handles security and compliance? Who gets credit, and who's willing to give up people and budget to make it real? A lot of corporate innovation systems are optimized for the front end of innovation. They're good at generating ideas, running workshops, building prototypes, and holding demo days. Far fewer are designed for the difficult transition from experiment to venture to scalable business. That transition requires governance, metered funding, clear decision rights, dedicated leadership, and deliberate decisions about where the venture belongs. If I were evaluating a corporate innovation center, I would ask 3 questions. Number 1, is it connected to strategy? Number 2, is it protected enough to experiment differently from the core? And number 3, if something works, is there a clear path for turning it into a real business? The survival of your company in the AI era likely depends on entrepreneurs. These are individuals who are willing to challenge the status quo, identify opportunities as well as threats. But the corporate immune system, the culture and systems that fuel current revenue streams may be preventing entrepreneurs from doing the work that they do best. Developing an environment that's conducive for corporate entrepreneurship may not only help to prepare you for disruption, it can help you to uncover the next big thing. If this video was helpful to you, check out the earlier videos in this series about entrepreneurship. Give this video a like and also subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Also, if you have questions or you'd like to dive more into different aspects of corporate entrepreneurship, please put them in the comments and I'll incorporate these into future videos. Thanks for tuning in. Keep going.